One Last Time for Second Chances. Written by a confused kitten. Read by Arashi. His feet have barely touched the ground before there's something around his chest, tugging him backwards. Whatever it is, it's solid and strong. Something that can't be said about him, even on a good day. Even when he didn't just lose a fight. Thrown a fight, his mind corrects. When he didn't just thrown a fight. It's like someone wrapped iron around his lungs, fitted it against his ribcage, and Aventurine knows better than to fight when his, let's call them clients, get like this. He knows it's best to let the fight leave his body, put on his most charming smile, and start pulling lies out of his bag of tricks. Better to let people have their way and get something out of it than leave in one piece and gain nothing at all. But Penacony is supposed to be his risks and his rewards, his thrills and disappointments, his way out of all of this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Aventurine's talents have always been in defending himself, more about putting up shields than anything else. If there's one thing that his youth, he doesn't dare call it childhood, not even in his own mind, taught him, it was how to fight dirty. If that's what it takes, then well, Aventurine will stain his hands pitch black as long as he gets to make this one damn choice himself before the IPC throws a noose around his throat and he tries to claw at the thing around his chest, tries to get a better stance. Why is the damn thing so tall? He's scrambling just to stand solidly, and for once, Aventurine doesn't care about his image. Let them see the crazed Afghan, or the cruel Sigonian, or whatever the people want to see. Aventurine has already watched the final curtain close on his performance, already taken the final bow. He's this close to slamming his head back, anything to loosen the vice around him, and then soft hair against his throat, his cheek, the weight of someone's head tucked between his neck and shoulders, a warm breath passing over his skin. Arms, he realizes, arms are wrapped around him, not some unbreakable thing, but the thought scares him less than it should. Gambler, the person says against his skin. It's over. The voice is familiar. Familiarity has never been a protection against anything. Like hell it is, Aventurine says, the words practically dripping with all of the venom he can muster. I've put far too much time into this play to just give up now, Aventurine, the person says. And if he didn't know better, he'd almost say that they sound desperate. You are not an idiot, so for once in your life, stop running towards the worst possible outcome you can imagine. He laughs. Trust me, Aventurine says, as though anyone would ever be stupid enough to. This is far from the worst outcome I'd imagined. Our dear friend Sunday has a reputation to uphold, after all, and he hasn't bothered to set that aside so far. Kakavasha! They. Ratio. It's Ratio. Because there's no one left who knows that damned name. No one else who has the audacity to use it. Say. And Aventurine goes still. Lets the fight bleed out of him, as the quiet words pierce the thoughts running rampant inside his head, even if a part of him hates the doctor for daring to say it. The sound that escapes him is practically a hiss. Veritas, Aventurine says, pointedly. Don't call me that. Ratio loosens his grip, just barely enough to be noticeable. If you didn't want it used, you wouldn't have given it to me, he says, blunt as ever. Quieter. I wouldn't use it. if I didn't already know it was safe to. And he has a point. Aventurine knows that he does. It was a gamble, telling the doctor his given name, whispering it where no one could ever hear, the last chip he had to give away. Or maybe the only one he could give, especially to someone like Veritas Ratio. Ratio gets his name, and Aventurine gets a signal to know that they don't have any unwanted company. Simple as that. Except it isn't simple at all. Not really. And a part of Aventurine still can't believe that he actually went through with it, let alone that Ratio had the gall to use it in a place like this. Consequences be damned, and very well, Aventurine says, not trying to keep the bitterness out of his tone. Forgive me if I don't believe that. A sigh, lips brushing against branded skin. Stubborn fool, Ratio murmurs, almost fondly. Give me a token of your trust, and I swear to Nos you won't be disappointed. Aventurine wants to argue, wants to question why either of them would, but even a sliver of trust in a god, would swear to their name, when the gods have ruined them both. Kakavasha and his never-ending luck. Veritas, never acknowledged at all. But then, those lips press against his throat, light as a feather, and softer than any touch Aventurine has ever known. Stand down, dear gambler. Ratio whispers, please. It's the last word that gets to him. That simple, please. Ratio doesn't do platitudes and manners, doesn't see the need for small talk or triviality, and so on and so on. Aventurine knows this. He always has. The two of them don't do this, don't do any of this. But Aventurine closes his eyes, lets his head fall back, and exposes his throat. I'm tired, Veritas. I know. Some kind of good luck charm I am. A sigh. I'm more of a curse, aren't I, Doc? Ratio shifts, and though his arms remained wrapped around Aventurine, it's more of an embrace. One hand settled on his hip, fingers running soothingly over his torn clothes. The other hand intertwining with his own. You are nothing of the sort, Ratio says, and somehow there's a reverence to the words. The sound Aventurine makes isn't quite a laugh. Prove it, then. The hand on his hip slides upwards, cupping the side of Aventurine's face. He runs the thumb across his cheek, under Aventurine's eyes, and he has to force himself not to open them, not to flinch away from that delicate, oh so delicate touch. If he doesn't open his eyes, there's no waking up from this dream. If he doesn't hold this in his hands, there's no way he can shatter it. If that is what you want, Ratio says, far too gently, then gladly. And Aventurine doesn't break, doesn't shatter, but it's close. There are only so many pieces of himself left, each one a jagged, cutting shard, and well, he knows they aren't pleasant to hold, edges digging into the palm of your hand, biting and cold and hurting, and Ratio holds him like he doesn't mind blood slipping between his fingers, like he doesn't mind the mess and the stains. I'm not free to want things, Veritas, he starts to say, one final attempt to stop whatever it is that's happening. The IPC can rot in the hell they've made for themselves, Ratio says, before he can even finish, and any other organization who feels they have the right to use their people as sacrificial lambs can damn well die with them. Damn you, Ratio, Aventurine says, and he won't break. He won't. He fucking won't. Why? Why do you have to go and tear down every reason I come up with? A soft laugh. You're not coming up with reasons, Ratio says. You're practically asking to be refuted. It wasn't intentional, not even a little bit. And, even if it was, Aventurine wouldn't admit to it. Rigging the game only works if people don't know the odds have been changed. And well, this wasn't a game Aventurine had planned on playing. Fuck. Ratio wasn't a game he'd been planning on at all. It's hard work trying to argue with you, Aventurine says, as though the relationship wasn't built on bickering. I already told you, Ratio. I'm tired. And then, Ratio is shifting his hands, settling them on Aventurine's shoulders, just so he can spin him around. Ratio's eyes never fail to remind him of Dawn. Aventurine muses absently, staring up at the genius. His mouth moves, but for once in his life, Aventurine doesn't have anything to say. Let me take you home, Ratio says, almost pleading. You can rest there, and no one will dare to touch you. Not the family, not the Astral Express, not even the damned IPC. Home, huh? Aventurine sighs. He's not too proud to admit that he's starting to stay on his feet. I haven't had one of those in a long time. Ratio's hand slips from his shoulder to the back of his head, fingers curling in the ends of Aventurine's hair. I have a flat, meant to house more than one person, he says, and Aventurine suddenly gets the feeling that Ratio has thought about this. There's a spare room, of course, and 3 cat cakes, courtesy of the Genius Society. I wouldn't trust Ron May to properly care for a rock who would adore you, and... Ratio? Should he call him Veritas? He doesn't know. Trails off, an odd flush high on his cheeks, eyes darting somewhere off to the side, before settling on Aventurine. The Express, he thinks absently, unable to look away. That has to be it. They're still around here somewhere, after all, despite Ratio's inopportune timing, and a part of him wonders what they're thinking, wonders if they're laughing, staring at his performance turned confession turned whatever this is, and there's a soft, gentle touch to his forehead, and it takes Aventurine an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize that Veritas Ratio had kissed him. A quick press of lips against his temple, feather light, and gone, before he even had a chance to catch up. But a kiss, nevertheless. Veritas! Aventurine breathes, half convinced that his mind is playing tricks on him. Ratio, fuck it, Aventurine thinks. Veritas just flashes him an infuriating smile, all smug confidence and a soft kind of joy. I would like you to prove me wrong, Veritas says, and what better way is there than inviting you into my own home? And even someone like him would be hard-pressed to argue with something like that. You're terrible, Aventurine says, but when Veritas guides him to lean against him, Aventurine doesn't fight it. Veritas is warm, and the arm that drapes over his shoulders is a steadying thing. If he's honest with himself, Aventurine can't remember the last time he felt this safe. Can't remember the last time this kind of warmth had his eyes falling shut, his mind creeping towards slumber. It's a long, long moment before he speaks again. Ask me again, with my name. You know the one. Ratio sighs, resting his chin on top of Aventurine's head. You're nothing but trouble, gambler, he says, but there's something fond about it. Then, Kakavasha, would you do me the honor of accompanying me home? I would like to offer you a place to rest. Aventurine, Kakavasha, laughs, lets his eyes slip close, and leans against Veritas even more heavily. That's all you had to say, Doc, he says with a smile. That's all you had to say. It only takes a few minutes for Aventurine to fully collapse against him. Still, it's a slow thing, though his eyes flutter closed and his body melts against Veritas. His breathing evens out, and for a moment, the unnatural stillness causes his heart to skip a beat. The logical part of him knows that Aventurine is simply sleeping, exhausted from fighting the Express, as well as an emanator. Veritas scoops him into his arms, nevertheless, and not for the first time. It strikes him just how small Aventurine is when he's not flaunting his feathers. He's startlingly light, as though his bones are hollow, and even with his heeled boots, Aventurine barely came up to his shoulders. A part of Veritas still demands that he checks Aventurine's pulse, that he counts his shaking breaths, and never lets him go. But there are more important things to worry about than irrational concerns, especially when the Astral Express stands mere feet away. The Astral Express, who knows nothing of Aventurine and his past, nothing of his pain, nothing about all the effort Veritas has put in to try and heal his scars, and Aventurine shifts in his sleep, nuzzling into Veritas's shoulder. He makes a choked-off kind of sound, a murmur in a language Veritas doesn't understand, and Veritas wants to hide him away from the rest of the world. Veritas hushes him gently, readjusting his grip around Aventurine's shoulders to pet his hair. Almost immediately, Aventurine relaxes.
Is Aventurine okay?
One of the crew members, a small girl, with white and pink hair and a bow in her hands, asks, taking a small step forward.
I don't trust him, but some of the things he was saying...
As much as he hates it, Veritas can imagine exactly the things Aventurine had said. His silver tongue, for all of Aventurine's charm, was just as capable of spitting biting poison as it was of singing sweet praises, and when it comes to himself, Aventurine has very few kind words to say. And there's a catch to the question the girl asked, whether she knows it or not, because Aventurine would never be all right. Not as long as his careless gambles and dangerous thoughts worked in the IPC's favor, leading them to success over and over again. Veritas doesn't claim to be a psychologist, but he can admit that it's a field he isn't well versed in. But even he knows that encouraging unhealthy behavior is never going to be the way to overcome it. But Kakavasha? Beneath all of those masks, those damn smiles, and fever-bright eyes, there was a chance he's willing to bet on. Though, Veritas knows Aventurine would laugh if he heard Veritas utter those words out loud. My partner, Veritas says, careful to choose the correct words, as reckless as he may have been, will be all right, as long as he allows himself to recover. Distantly, he hears various members of the Express offer their platitudes, apologies for what had occurred, as though they could have ever stopped Aventurine when his mind was locked onto a gamble, and wishes that he heals fully. He pays them no mind, however, trying to figure out what to say. The words have to be right, have to be decisive, and beyond questioning, and they have to be straight to the point. None of Aventurine's flattery or Veritas's own tendency to over-explain. Between the two of them, Veritas has always preferred to leave the theatrics to Aventurine, but in this kind of scenario, those very theatrics could be the best way to proceed. And well, Aventurine, however, Veritas says, as evenly as he can, is dead. To say the words spark a reaction would be an understatement. There's a burst of noise, as the crew voices whatever they hadn't been saying previously. As if Veritas wasn't distracted by Aventurine stirring, it'd be near impossible to make out each individual word, let alone full sentences. They're worried about him, Veritas thinks, and despite the situation, the thought brings a smile to his face. Aventurine needs more people in his corner, needs more people who will bother to look past the surface. Dr. Veritas Ratio! A voice shouts, and the Stellaron girl, Estelle if he remembers correctly, steps forward, arms crossed over her chest. What the actual fuck are you on about? I can see him breathing from here. Simple, Veritas says, looking down at the sleeping form cradled in his arms. This is the one opportunity Aventurine has to get out from underneath the IPC's thumb before they actually kill him. He narrows his eyes, dares them to argue. I won't allow that to happen. Stell watches him for a long moment, searching for something that he can't name. Her golden eyes are piercing, are knowing, leaving very little room for error. And whatever she's searching for, Veritas hopes she finds it. Then she nods. Then Aventurine is dead, she says, her voice far too light. They're hurting him, aren't they? I might be new here, but isn't it our job as the Astral Express to help people in need? And she says it as though it's simple, when in reality, it's anything but. Aventurine has been a wanted man, in more ways than one, really, since the moment he was born, and it's not easy to avoid the IPC's watchful gaze. It's even harder to escape when you've been under it for as long as Aventurine has. And yet, the rest of the Express crew nods along with her, their navigator, clasping her hands together as she steps forward. Stella's correct, she says, smiling softly. I know the IPC has their hands in more than a few questionable enterprises, and, if need be, you two are welcome to board the Express off of Penacony until you're able to find your way to safety. It's astounding, to say the least. Completely and utterly astounding. Veritas finds himself nodding nevertheless. It'd be foolish to turn you down, he says, taking another glance at Aventurine's face. He needs to rest. Veritas continues. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first time he slept since arriving in Penacony. If the navigator has any thoughts, she doesn't say them. She only smiles. Come on then, she says. Let's get you settled in now, and as soon as we're done here, we can find a way to get you home. Home, Veritas thinks, watching Aventurine's chest rise and fall. He thinks he's already found it.